Welcome to the Navigating Dental Insurance Podcast, where we don't take from insurance companies. Here are your hosts, Mr. Jordan Comstock and Mr. Ben Tuine.
Welcome to another amazing episode of the Say No to PPOs podcast. My name is Ben Tuine, and today I'm your solo host. Jordan had to step out and take care of some business on his own. But today we have Jen with us. Jen is an expert hygiene coach. Probably one of, I don't think I even know any other hygiene coaches that are also billing experts and coding experts. So we have Jennifer Lyman with us today. Jen, great to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I know that you appeared on last week's episode with Erica to talk about, Erica was kind of doing her spiel on the billing and coding stuff, key performance indicators, and so forth. So today it's just you and I.
Yep.
Let's start with your background, Jen. Can you share with our listeners how you got started in dentistry and sort of what brought you here to where you're at today in terms of you being a hygiene coach and a billing and coding coach as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is a progressive story, I feel like, and one that includes a lot of other people as well. But, when I went to school, I just wanted to be a hygienist. That was all I wanted to do. I wanted to help people do that. I was a hygienist for, I guess I still am, but was a hygienist clinically full-time for about 15 years. And I started to run into all the issues that most hygienists run into is, burnout. I was getting back issues. I started getting cortisone shots in my back before I was even 30 years old. And at that point, I was like, okay, something's got to change. And so I started looking at other ways out of dentistry. But of course, the way things happen, dentistry will always pull you back because it is a love of yours. I mean, if you go into dentistry, you do it for the people and you do it for just the community. It's great. And so there was a few influential people in that. There was a couple doctors that gave me a chance and let me help them start their practices. I was able to do everything from, opening the doors and construction and credentialing to growing it to a multi-million-dollar practice, doing all of the billing and the hygiene in that practice, going back and forth from the front to the back. And then after that, other people started asking for help. I was a manager and started doing billing on my own for lots of different medical providers and dental providers. And now here we are. So that's kind of where we're at.
That's awesome. No, I know what you mean about, you start in dentistry and then you're looking to make a change, but dentistry is sort of your calling and you may not be doing exactly the same thing you used to do before, but you're doing something different in the same space. And the pandemic has sort of influenced many people in that direction, just finding ways that kind of are kinder on your body, from a clinical perspective. But no, that's cool. I think what you do is very much needed in the industry. So what do you think about your experience in terms of billing, like your understanding on billing? How can that help you as a hygienist?
Oh, man, I feel like that helps me in a lot of ways. But also being a hygienist helps me in billing too, right? It kind of goes both ways. I think knowing the ins and outs of insurance plans and exceptions and limitations that in regards to hygiene helps a ton. And we're able to teach this to our practices right now too, right? Like what can you bill as a hygienist? What are you already doing that you can bill for? And now I kind of know those codes that are available to use and are available to bill for. And also using the correct verbiage when we're talking with patients and even staff members. And we're talking about insurance. We're not saying things like your insurance covers this or your insurance doesn't cover that. That's out of our repertoire at this point, right? Like we are going to say things differently. So we treat insurance like a discount. It's not going to be the end-all be-all for insurance and for the patients and for their plans and what they get covered. So I feel like I kind of wear two hats. When I am a hygienist, I stick to that and I take care of the patient, and I feel like I'm able to build those codes that are billable and maximize their insurance that they're entitled to. And also, I kind of stay in my lane there too, right? Because when I'm up front, I take on that role. And I think sometimes in dentistry, roles can get very muddled. Roles and responsibilities in the office. Front likes to kind of meander to the back and maybe do some dental assisting, and hygienists like to help out with assisting. And honestly, I feel like roles work best when we all stay in our lane. I think Erica likes to call it that you stay in your lane of genius, and I think that's a very clear way to say it. We all have our niche and our spot in the office, and we kind of need to stay there so the office can function properly. Some crossover is going to happen, and that's great, so everybody can cross-trained. But when I'm billing, I really focus on that because there are systems and processes that need to be adhered to. And as a hygienist, same thing. I really focus on what my charting looks like, so it's thorough for documentation, and make sure that my notes have everything in there that the front office needs so that they can bill properly and code properly. And I think just like being really, really thorough in my assessments helps me a ton when I'm a hygienist, and really helps the front in billing and vice versa.
Gotcha. I really like what you said there, especially on the part where you quoted Erica on staying in your lane of genius.
Yep.
I think that phrase in and of itself is genius.
Yep.
So a side question to kind of follow up with that is there any merit in the clinical team, particularly hygienists and doctors, and sort of understanding the billing area and how that kind of ties in a way where everybody's staying in their lane of genius?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of where, that thorough charting comes into play. If I'm hygiene one day and I don't do a perio chart, but I treatment plan SRP, how is the front going to know and have the correct documentation to bill the insurance for that and prove that this is what this patient needed? So I think there are some ways that we can integrate billing concepts into clinical practice, but not necessarily, we're doing the billing in the back, but we allow the billing team to do their job more efficiently and, easier too.
Yeah, sounds like just coordinating and having regular communication and an understanding, right, on responsibilities and roles.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and there needs to be that communication between the front and the back in general. If the billing team gets a denial for something and it's not, medically necessary, that needs to be communicated to the doctor so that they can then, switch up their notes or whatever they need to do in order to change that. So there needs to be communication between both for sure, and it's definitely a team effort.
For sure, yeah. When I think about the world of hygiene department, I think about the codes, right? And of course, fortunately, with hygiene protocols, we're not dealing with a whole lot of codes, right?
No.
What is your opinion on the most underutilized code in the hygiene department? And then why? Why is it underutilized?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when we do our assessments of practices, we do this, an entire report that we look at, and we look at the top 25 most commonly used codes. And honestly, Profi is always in there. Sometimes SRP is in there, but there's like 2 hygiene codes in that top 25 codes. And if you have multiple hygienists, I feel like half of your codes should be hygiene codes for your top 25, because there's so many different ways that we can use those and utilize those to the best of our ability. But I feel like there's 2 that really stick out to me that I see underutilized significantly in most of the practices that we work with. And the first one is the 4346 code. This one is still unknown, I feel like, to hygienists, or they are scared to use it, or they don't know if they're within the parameters to use that. So that's something that we really teach on pretty significantly is, what does this look like in order to bill for? And it bridges that gap between the healthy Profi patient and an SRP patient. We do have some offices that their demographic, they are going to lean more towards SRP due to the area that they're in and maybe the demographic that they serve. But there is this code that can give us a more accurate representation of what we're treating the patient for. So that's the gingivitis. If a patient has gingivitis, they're in ortho, they're going through, cancer treatment, chemo, they haven't had their teeth cleaned in over a year. This is a code that more accurately describes what we're doing for that patient. And then with that, we're able to do either laser bacterial reduction or additional therapies that can help move the patient towards health. So that is one code that is severely underutilized, I guess. And then the other one is desensitization. So that's B9911. So that's application of desensitization to the root surface. And this one, I feel like almost every patient could benefit from, myself included. When I get my teeth cleaned, I always have them put it on 2 spots that are always, always sensitive, and I'm a hygienist.
Mm-hmm.
So patient comes in, that's one of the questions that I ask them as they're leaning back. I say, when you get your teeth cleaned, is there any areas that are sensitive? And they'll say, oh yeah, this one's always sensitive. And I'm like, hey, do you want me just to put some desensitizer on that? It'll really help during the cleaning. It's a quick 2-second application. You're utilizing the patient's benefits, and it is billable to insurance, and it makes the patient more comfortable. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So 4346 and then 9911, the
One.
desensitization.
I feel like those are the 2 most underutilized.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That would make sense to me as you're kind of explaining it. Oftentimes what I see in many practices, I think we're going to go back to Erica. She mentioned this. Well, actually, she was quoting one of her clients saying that the client has a bloody prophy pallus, or
Yep.
pallus of bloody prophy means.
Yeah, bloody prophy pallus. We did talk about that one last week.
Why do you think, like, I understand sort of the dynamics of how a lot of dental practices operate in terms of the hygiene department itself. But what is your opinion as to why 4346 and 9911 are underutilized in hygiene?
I think 9911 is not known that it's a billable code. They may do that for the patient, apply some fluoride to that area, but not really know to bill it, or it's not communicated between the front and the back. 4346, I feel like there's, it is still an unknown. It's kind of a gray area. I feel like in dentistry, not a lot of hygienists are trained on how to use that code and also how to prep the patient for that code. So, this isn't something that I know last week I talked about this too. We're not selling dentistry. We're treating our patients, and 4346 is a way to bridge that gap for treating the patients that are kind of in that in between. And we can still bring them back, right? We can still bring them back to prophy, but at this time, when you see them in your chair, what do they present with? And that comes with all of those assessments that we take. The periodontal charting, we're doing the x-rays. Is there any bone loss? Then no, this patient is not a gingivitis patient. This is now an SRP. So there's a lot of different assessments that will guide you one way or another. But 4346, insurance still doesn't recognize it as highly as SRP, I should say. And so hygienists don't know what to do with it. And they don't know how insurance covers it. They don't know if there is going to be an out-of-pocket, if it's now going to apply to the deductible. They don't want to make the patient pay for something and switch them over and make the patient say, well, why was I a prophy last time and now I'm a gingivitis cleaning and I saw you 6 months ago? Yeah. So there's ways that you can help the patient move along with you in your assessments, to where when you tell them, you have gingivitis, we really need to treat this, they're already there too. They're asking you how to treat that. And that's really where we need to get them to, is taking, that responsibility for their own health, because a lot of hygienists will internalize that and take responsibility for themselves, and that's just not fair. You don't brush their teeth on a day-to-day basis. You don't floss their teeth on a day-to-day basis. This is on them, but we also need to have them value the care that you're going to give them.
Yeah, no, I like that. I remember when I was helping. Well, I was the head over all things insurance for a DSO, and when I went in to get my own cleaning, this is way before 4346 was created, at least 15 years before that code was developed. And my hygienist did mention to me that I had gingivitis, and she's like, yeah, we got to get this under control. And I remember when I got the EOB, and I remember this because I talk about this in a lot of my presentations around the country. When I did get the statement from insurance, it was billed as a prophy. But she did say that I had a need for scaling, root planing here and there, but not much, And I thought she was really excellent in her explanation. But when people in the public meet with hygienists, I think we have a high level of trust for hygienists in general. We view hygienists just like nurses, and nurses have consistently landed in the #1 spot of most trusted professionals in almost every country, but here in the United States for 20 straight years,
Yeah.
And I had an enormous amount of trust in my hygienist at that time when I was working for this dental group, just with the way it was explained to me. But I'm wondering, like, so for my scenario, could there have been a scenario where the Prophy code was combined with the 4342, which is scaling root planing for 1 to 3 teeth?
Yeah, and this is something that, kind of goes hand in hand with hygiene and billing. We need to get those insurance estimates and benefits ahead of time so we know, one, if we can do SRP and Prophy in the same day, and two, what the out-of-pocket is going to be for the patient so we can accurately present that to them. My preference, and I think a lot of hygienists are kind of with me on this one, is prefer to do the least invasive thing first. So if the patient has disease in localized areas and, we need to do a Prophy on the rest of the areas, I prefer to do a Prophy first, educate first, and go over oral health care, what they can do at home to minimize risk of getting, a repeat SRP a year down the road. Go through, laser, what the SRP appointment is going to look like. That appointment is really perio counseling, as well as the Prophy on the uninvolved teeth, and working on that primarily. When I bring the patient back, I want to focus solely on those areas so they get like my utmost attention. And then from there, the patient already has the education and the know-how, and they're already in their routine in order to prevent any further disease from progressing. So I prefer to do SRP Prophy first, and then SRP following that, a week or two later in those localized areas. And then from there, just patient education, 3-month intervals.
That makes perfect sense because when you look at it from an insurance perspective, a lot of times insurance carriers will allow you to do a Prophy today, and then sometimes 15 or 30 days later, they'll cover scaling and root planing, right? And so the way you
Well, it
described
doesn't
it,
make sense to go backwards. If you did
yeah,
SRP first and then Prophy, you're like, they have disease, but wait, not on these areas, and it doesn't make sense to me. So Prophy first, treating the areas that are not involved, and then progressively going into, more aggressive treatment makes more sense to me.
I, I like your protocol because when I think about it, if I'm in the chair, naturally a lot of the negative experience that patients get is just shock, right? They weren't prepared for something that you
Right.
say, especially when it comes to a financial situation. And so from a logical perspective, I'm thinking about the most common phenomena that occurs in patients when they complain about money is they have this fight or flight response. Like I had no, like I didn't know why did last time I was here I did this, it was free, whatever, or paid for by my insurance. And naturally, I'm wondering if that's a reason why like a lot of practices don't even use 4342. It's billed out 0
Yeah.
times a year every year for a lot of practices, even
Yeah, it's that bait and
4346.
switch.
Yeah, and I think it's
Yeah.
just
Patients hate the bait and switch.
yeah, but I like what you're saying because I didn't really draw that connection before in terms of how that impacts the person's line of thinking, right? In terms of them being prepared for the perio protocols, which do require out of pocket. If you have insurance, you're going to be paying for most everything in the perio category, at least
Right.
20% or sometimes more. No, that's perfect. I
Right.
think your understanding of that, hopefully some listeners will find that of great value because I do. It's like, yeah, I didn't really realize and draw that connection until you mentioned it. Um,
Well, they come expecting a cleaning, right? So you're still giving them what they're expecting, but then educating them on why they need this other treatment too. And I've had almost 100% success with people coming back for that because they see the value in it at that first appointment, and they still got their clean. They still got what they came for. But at the end, I always say, you're not done. You may
yeah,
think you are, but I did not clean these teeth, and I don't touch them because
yeah.
I want them to know those teeth are not cleaned, and we need to go back and, do a more aggressive treatment on that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I remember the first time I went to a dental practice here in the United States. I was 18 years old, and the hygienist mentioned I was like, gosh, that was back in the 90s, and she said, "Yeah, you." It's like it's surprising because you're showing a lot more bone loss than a person your age. Mind you, I'm coming from a third world country, so
Yeah,
our
yeah,
hygiene, education in hygiene and medicine in general is very poor where I grew up. But when she mentioned bone loss, and I had, well, does the bone ever grow back? And she says, no, like it doesn't. But here's what you need to do if you want to save your teeth.
Yeah.
Like she's like, it's not, your teeth aren't going to fall out tomorrow, but they, you could prevent them from falling out anytime in your life, and this is what you need to do. And holy smokes, did I follow what she said? Like I
I
followed.
was going to say, I bet you did it.
I
You
did,
saw
yeah.
value in that. Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
time. Yeah. Like every hygienist that I've ever been treated by, I just always had a great level of education shared with me. But I noticed that it never, and again, if hygienists are listening to this, this is, of course, Jen's a hygienist. I'm not insulting hygienists with this next statement. I think
Yeah.
that there's most certainly a lack of understanding on how hygiene treatment and tie in with coding and billing.
Right.
Because a lot of
Yeah.
times when I go to hygiene appointments, well, I don't experience that much these days because I take what the hygienists tell me very seriously. Um,
hmm
and but in years past, when they did mention that they had to do some scaling, well, they called it deep cleanings, deeper cleaning, but they would have to scale here and there, and it's a lot more extensive than just a regular prophy. I never saw an invoice for scaling, root planing, or anything perio. And
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of, as I get in, as I learn more about hygiene protocols, the one thing that I've learned, hygienists are easy to like. Like almost every hygienist
hmm
that I've ever been treated by, they're super sweet, super kind, and you almost have that initial feeling of trust towards that person, even if it's the first time you met them,
Right.
right? And I've
Yeah.
always thought
Yeah.
and
I mean,
believed
we are pretty
that,
great.
yeah, we are. Like hygienists are amazing people. And they always make you
I
feel
agree.
like a
Yeah.
million bucks. Like every time you're in the chair, they make you feel so good. And I think that's why
Yeah.
nurses and hygienists are in that number one spot, most trusted professionals, is because it's the type of person that usually gets those jobs. But you spend a lot more time with patients than most other people in the practice.
Right.
And so naturally, people trust hygienists to where I feel
hmm
like implementing your protocol, if I were told that I had to pay a little bit extra, I would. I was like, yeah, if that means I'm going to save my teeth for the rest of my life, and I'm only 18 years old now, I'm going to do and pay whatever you want me to pay to keep my teeth, you know?
Right.
So the trust is there is what I'm saying. The trust is there. I just think that the understanding and preparing patients is probably what's missing in most practices in terms of perio discussions about 43, 46, and so forth.
hmm
Uh,
Yeah, and that verbiage needs to happen between the front and the back, the same verbiage. By the time I've done the prophy and I've educated the patient with their, the perio counseling and walked them up to the front, I want them to be like, okay, when can we schedule? And then the
yeah.
financial conversation happens. And as long as we all have that same verbiage throughout the office, the
Mhm.
patient knows like this is what we need to do to get you to health. And it's not any question, and they don't, question our integrity. Are we just trying to bait and switch them? Are we trying to get their money? No, like this is what they need for their health. And same thing if they were in a doctor's office, it's the same, process. So we just want to
Yeah.
see it as a similar thing.
Love it. I love it. So two more questions for you. So in the hygiene chair, what what patient assessment do you think is the most important to do?
Oh boy. I mean, all of them, but I think there are, besides x-rays, I do have four that I think are you have to do for a patient's health. First one is periodontal charting. This gives the insurance company kind of the whole picture of what's going on with their periodontal health. It gives a map of the mouth to the patient. It's a very, very powerful tool when it comes to patient education. And I feel like some patients, we build that rapport with our patients and they come in, they're like, oh, is that 4 down to a 3? Like they know if we explain to them what that is and what that assessment is, they know what to look for. So periodontal charting is my number one, has to be done at least once a year. I do see that, if hygienists don't have enough time, if they're really pressed for time or they're being asked too much of them in one appointment, that will not get done. And it's not really a step that can be skipped. So this one is the number one important one. Oral cancer screening, we have a unique opportunity in our chair to detect things early on as hygienists, and we should be maximizing that opportunity to the fullest. And these are times that, a doctor of primary care might look in their mouth really quickly, but we have a light, we have a magnifying glass, like we have, a unique opportunity to look for those things. So definitely that one. I had even a family member that had reached out with a picture of, their tongue that they thought there was a questionable spot. And it kind of went undetected at their dental office for 6 months.
Wow.
And I found out 6 months after that spot, and sure enough, it was cancer. And it was, she's a young gal, like young 20s, no risk factors, anything. And if that would have been caught, when they looking at her medical history, they probably didn't see anything. She's not a smoker, she's not a drinker, no family history of cancer, but that's what it was. And it's extreme treatment now, and it will affect her the rest of her life. So in that sense, oral cancer screening is also something that is a non-negotiable. That has to be done at every appointment, extraoral and intraoral. And then caries risk assessment. This also, I feel like, values dentistry as a whole, because we're giving the insurance company a reason to pay for increased preventive appointments and services for the patient that they deserve. So if we do a caries risk assessment, which is billable, by the way, everybody, if you do a caries risk assessment and that patient is moderate to high risk, okay, now what modalities in your office can you do to keep that in a low to moderate range? Mm-hmm. I've had chemotherapy patients that now we're doing fluoride trays, okay, also billable. You're doing fluoride varnish more frequently. You're doing cleanings every 3 months, which is filling the hygiene chair and also taking care of that patient and giving them the best care. So that's another one. Sleep apnea assessment, I feel like, is the last one, but last but not least. The Epworth Sleepiness Scale is one assessment that is easy to do when the patient comes in for their new patient appointment. Just fill that out really quickly, add it to your new patient paperwork, and it gives you a brief overview of what their sleep looks like and their overall health. So it gives us more knowledge and understanding so we can educate our patients on sleep apnea and risk factors for that. And that's something that I use even in the hygiene chair. I do a sleep apnea assessment, not just the paperwork, but like a visual overview of what we're looking at. And that's a whole nother episode down the road. But sleep apnea, when we sit that patient back and their tongue falls into their throat, like immediately we should start talking about sleep apnea and risk factors and things. We can't diagnose that. I want to be very clear, we cannot diagnose sleep apnea, but we can give them some tools and resources to figure out if that is something that they should be worried about.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's important. Sleep apnea, well, it's a problem, just like obesity, gum disease and all that stuff. It's a major problem across the country. And so this is good for me to hear, because this is actually really good education from a hygiene perspective on what you're thinking, or things that are helpful to think about in terms of evaluating patients, And then the final area is perio. Like, how do you help offices increase their perio performance?
Yeah, so this is kind of I would say, holistic approach, comprehensive approach. It varies depending on the office. We do the full report. We see where your office is at, and then we can cater to that. So if you're really, really great at diagnosing gingivitis, then maybe we'll focus on SRP, or maybe we'll focus on those supplemental codes. But so it can include a variety of things. I would say billing codes that you're doing, maybe we're seeing in your notes, but you're not billing for, things that you can benefit from that. Clarifying processes and systems. If you don't have a periodontal protocol and you have 5 hygienists, where's the threshold for treating patients? You need to come to an agreement on that. So we help them kind of systemize those things. Proper documentation. So we look at your note templates, make sure that everything is where it should be, and that it's very clear and understanding for the front office as well as the doctor throughout the entire office, as well as insurance companies. So, if we're ever audited, we want to make sure that your notes are completely comprehensive and cover everything during that appointment, and also that the billing matches those notes. So we go through all documentation and compliance and ethics when it comes to like clinical outcomes and treatment plans. And then I think the primary thing that we focus on when we increase periodontal performance is bridging that gap between the patient's reality of where their oral health is with the ideal clinical outcome that we want to see in the office. So where we want them to go, how do we get them from point A to point B, and get them to understand and value periodontal treatment. So it's still very much a patient and staff-focused approach. I personally, as a hygienist, I'm not going to tell you to start pushing treatment. I'm not going to tell hygienists to start selling treatment. But we will implement systems that naturally kind of comes with the territory. So what we discussed, I feel like, is much more comprehensive. It's still very, very much patient-focused. And we're prepping, conversations for hygienists and doctors to have these harder conversations to do those perio conversions. We're implementing doctor standard of care, making sure that the hygienists have what they need, physically and time-wise, making sure that the doctor is supporting those hygienists. I mean, it's really a loaded question when you ask me that, because it can vary so much depending on what the office needs and what their goals are as a practice and what the doctor's goals are. Got
it. Well, I like your answer. I think it was nice and short and sweet, straight to the point, and most certainly, that was good. and I recognize.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm like trying to consolidate that, but I'm like, I could talk for an hour on what we do for practice. But.
Which leads me to my next final question here is sort of, naturally the guests that we bring onto our podcast, there's sometimes some interest among listeners to get a hold of you, ask their own questions. But also to, in the event somebody that might want to retain you based upon your area of expertise, what's the best way that listeners can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so email is probably the best, and my email is Jen, so Jen, at hiddendentalprofit.com. And you can email any questions there. Happy to help whoever I can.
I really appreciate that, Jen. And just for our listeners, just like every other guest that we have, just be aware that they're also full-time employed people as well, but ask your questions. The purpose of bringing them on board is to kind of help them showcase their knowledge to the public, but also to provide assistance for those that can sort of resonate with the topics that are being discussed and the content that's being given, in an effort for you to be paired with a good expert that can help problem solve solutions that they're best at. So Jen, thank you so much for your time today. I think your answers and all that you provided, I actually learned quite a bit. I take notes on
great.
Every time I listen to talks or people on podcasts, I take notes, and I have 2 pages of notes of what you shared, and I'm going to, of course, try to condense that into show notes for our listeners, including your contact information that'll be posted there. Any final thoughts, Jen, for our listeners?
No, I think that's it. I think I just want everybody to know that it's, I think we're all doing our best, and I know that we all care about our patients a lot, and the way that we coach is just very patient-focused, very staff-focused. We want to retain the staff that you have in this economy and take care of your patients. So, yeah, thanks for having me, Ben.
Excellent. It was great having you on, Jen. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. Hit a like and share this episode with those that you feel might need some education, or at least some assistance in learning sort of these hygiene-related topics. And next week, we are going to have another guest come on board to talk about other things billing-wise. But if you have suggestions on areas or topics that you want us to cover, let us know. I know that we say this is the Say No to PPOs podcast, but we really cover just about any topic in the industry. So until next time, thanks for listening today, and hope you all have a great day.